Welcome everybody to the MCSS webinar, How Elections Work, a conversation with Barb Byrum. My name is Dave Johnson. I'm the president for Michigan Council for Social Studies, and I am also the chair of the team, and I will be your co-host this evening. I say co-host because I am also joined by our esteemed and amazing current president, Kimberly Wigglesworth. Pause for applause and cheers. Woohoo, yeah.
Stop it.
The two of us have been geeked about this learning opportunity since our guest this evening agreed to do it way back in October. We will get started in just a few minutes, but before we do, a couple of quick announcements. This is a one-off webinar on elections, and we are incredibly pleased to have the guest we've got with us tonight in our virtual studios. MCSS is pleased to offer this session for free to anyone who wants to participate, and recaps of this and future sessions will be available on our website and our official YouTube channel shortly after we are done recording it. Just a reminder that our annual conference this year is a return to in-person learning. It's in beautiful Traverse City area. We're looking forward to greeting you all in person in my neck of the woods. You won't want to miss 2 days of incredible learning, and you can get registered by visiting our website today. In addition, we are currently working with the Michigan Council for History Education to try to offer a spring webinar series. It may end up getting pushed to the fall just because we are having some issues with planning and getting stuff off the ground, but save the date. We've got another great webinar series coming soon is what I'll say, and it'll be akin to last spring's series with Dr. J. Michael Butler. So as we finalize our speakers and programming, watch our website for more info. As far as housekeeping goes, we've got 1 clock hour available for this session, and we'll take care of getting those out to you shortly. After we're done, we will email you all a form that needs to be returned to our offices after the session posts to our website tomorrow. Please take care of this within a week if you'd like the credit. It makes it a lot easier on our office manager's end. Also, make sure that your microphones are muted while our presenter is talking. As quiet as you might be, fingers on keyboards, shuffling of papers around on your desk, that's often picked up by microphones. So feel free to unmute when we get to the Q&A session. And you can always type questions in the chat, which Kim and I will be monitoring throughout the whole session. With that out of the way, let's meet our presenter. We have Barb Byrum with us. She is currently serving in her 3rd term as Ingham County Clerk. She's acting as the county's chief elections official. As clerk of one of the most populous counties in the state of Michigan, Byrum has successfully conducted 32 elections, 7 union elections, and was one of only a handful of counties to complete the 2016 presidential recount and the 2022 partial statewide recount of Proposal 3. Since 2016, Byrum has been credentialed as a certified elections registration administrator by Election Center, the only national program of continuing professional education that specializes in election administration and voter registration. In 2017, she served on Election Center's Security Task Force. Byrum lent her expertise to Michigan's Election Security Commission, the Secretary of State's team of advisors tasked with strengthening and better securing elections in the state. She's also a member of the Election Center's Ethics Project Focus Group. She's been a consistent advocate for voting rights of qualified registered voters with a focus on historically disenfranchised voters. She's a member of the Overseas Voting Initiative, a collaboration between the Council of State Governments and the U.S. Department of Defense to improve the process of voting by members of the military and civilians living abroad. She's been an active member of the community throughout her life, primarily promoting voter registration, including voter registration drives in partnership with the League of Women Voters, Ingham County Jail, and groups affiliated with Michigan State University. She's also registered voters at local events, including Black Lives Matter rallies, helping to ensure that rally attendees can vote for their issues at the ballot box. Byrum believes voting is the ultimate action of protest. She's also, if all of this wasn't enough, also served 3 terms as the Michigan State Representative, serving House District 67. During her time in the legislature, she served as the ranking Democrat on the House Committee on Redistricting and Elections. She graduated from Michigan State University, go Spartans, with a bachelor's degree in agribusiness management and holds a law degree from MSU College of Law. Barb, welcome, and thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Yeah, thank you for having me. So, do you want to just get into it?
Well, I think Kim may have a question to start us
Okay. I'm just so excited.
I'm so excited that you're excited. This is, like I said, I've been geeking out about this for quite a while. So I know that a few of the people that are in attendance, maybe everybody, probably follows you on Twitter. And I know a lot of people are really curious about the origins of your joke then vote tweets. So what can you tell us about that? Where that
Yeah. So joke then vote tweets started, I don't know, maybe 2 years ago or so. So it all started when former President Trump was running for office. And I have small humans, and if they were to act the way the candidate was acting, they would be disciplined. So we stopped watching the news. So then all we watch on TV is sports ball or swimming or water polo. And then that wasn't enough. So I needed another outlet. And my next outlet was Joke Then Vote. And that was just to, I'm on Twitter first thing in the morning before I'm even out of bed. And, I wanted to start things in a more positive start. So I started tweeting Joke Then Vote. None of the jokes are originals. I usually find them when I can't sleep in the middle of the night. However, many of the jokes are linked to what I am doing that day or that week. So if you noticed any swimming type of jokes recently, it's because it's swim meet season. When you notice jokes about certain states, it's sometimes because I'm going to, or I've already left a certain state, that kind of stuff. So sometimes the jokes are linked to my personal life. And then I started waving at people on Twitter, and that was another outlet to address some of my frustrations with our society and many of the players, especially in Michigan politics. I know I took a couple waves at a Colorado election official a few months back, and that was because I had just left a bunch of Colorado election administrators, and they were expressing their displeasure, and I couldn't sleep. So I had a little bit of fun with that. But yeah, that's how Joke Then Vote came, and that's how I'm waving at people on Twitter. Twitter is just an outlet for me. It's my personal handle. It's not affiliated with my day job that isn't really only days. But yeah, I'm very active on Twitter. It's fun currently.
Well, I had no idea that the jokes were sometimes linked to what you're going to be doing that day. So now every time I see that hashtag going forward, I'm going to try to solve the riddle of, I wonder what Barb is doing today.
Yeah, and I'm trying to up my game too, and I'm on TikTok, and these hips don't shake because I need to get reelected. So, I'm trying to do TikTok stuff, but there shall be no dancing on my TikTok channel.
No one needs to see me dance either. So
Right.
we're good on that front. So let's get into elections here.
Yeah.
Every 2 years in November, there's an election of some sort. Plus there's local elections and primary elections along the way. I just got my property tax statement, and there's a special election coming up just for my little town to renew some of the millages and things like that. But let's start with this past November 8th. When do elections begin for a county clerk?
Yeah, so not so long ago, people didn't even know what a county clerk was, let alone that they were affiliated with elections. That has changed over the years with allegations about the integrity of our elections. But an election begins months before the election day. Oftentimes people think, oh, well, clerks, they only run the day of election and then they're done and they don't do anything the rest of the week. That could not be any further from the truth. As county clerks in the state of Michigan, we hold all the vital records, birth, marriage, death. We are the clerk of the circuit court. So all of those circuit court records, we keep those safe and secure. DD 214s, which are your military discharge paper. Concealed pistol license applications come through the county clerk. Notary applications come through the county clerk. We are the local filing official for campaign finance reports. So if anyone is interested in how much money is being spent on a candidate's race and where that money is coming from, that's available at your county clerk's office. And then we are the chief elections official in the county. So keep in mind, there are the county clerks. Michigan, we have 83 counties, so we have 83 county clerks. Of those 83 county clerks, about 38 of them are also clerk registers. So they're register of deeds and county clerks. Statute allows those offices to be combined so long as the Board of Commissioners combines them prior to the filing deadline and meets some other qualifications prior to the filing deadline for the election. So there are about 38 clerk registers. I'm a county clerk. And so to talk about elections, well, there's a filing deadline for candidates or for questions to be placed on the ballot. It's typically 60 days. Right now, the Michigan Association of County Clerks is asking the legislature to expand that to 90 days before the election so that we have time to prepare for the election. Because in that small amount of time right now, the county clerk does as follows. We take the filing, we program the election, we program the computers to read the ballots for an optical scan state. So in Ingham County, we do that programming in-house because I know that's the safest and most secure way to run an election. But many other county clerks will contract with a vendor to do that computer programming. Once the computer programming is finished, we will do internal testing. We will then get proof ballots. The proof ballots we send to the local city and township clerks for them to take a look at. We send it to the school district specifically if there is a school question. Usually it's true in law firm. We send the question to the law firm or to the jurisdiction that placed the question on the ballot for their approval. Then the county election commission will meet to approve the ballots. The county election commission under statute is made up of the chief probate registrar, the county treasurer, and the county clerk. We approve ballots. We approve the consolidation of precincts, polling locations. We approve election bills to be paid. That's not done by the Board of Commissioners. It's actually done by the Election Commission. And then because it's the probate judge and the treasurer, they go about their other job, and then I continue to administer the election. It is at that time that I order the ballots. There are only a handful of printers in the state of Michigan that are certified, approved ballot printing companies. And so we get ballots printed. I work with my locals to make sure they order enough ballots. And then those ballots are sent directly to the locals. I don't want them. So the ballots go directly to the locals. And then I work with the locals to make sure they have precinct kits and sufficient supplies for the in-precinct, as well as the absentee counting board. For jurisdictions under 10,000, I train all of the precinct workers. Precinct workers, often called volunteers, are not volunteers. They're paid terribly, but they are actually employees of the local clerk. I train them unless that local clerk has a population of over 10,000. In that case, they train their workers. And the reason that is because typically, if a local clerk, city or township clerk, has a jurisdiction population of over 10,000, typically they're a full-time clerk and they're a more professional clerk, election administrator. Then I send all of the programming to the local clerk for them to have a public accuracy testing of the equipment and of the tabulators. A public accuracy testing is a public meeting, like any public meeting you know, except this one is rarely attended. And it's where the local clerk is testing my programming to make sure that the ballots are being tabulated properly. Then everything is locked up and currently wait for election day to unlock, and the local clerk will assist voters on election day. The county clerk on election day, at least in Ingham County, I am fielding calls from local clerks, from voters who are confused or actively being disenfranchised. I'm dealing with emergencies. We've had power outages, we've had floods, we've had pandemics, we've had a lot. And so I'm fielding those calls. And then that's mainly what I do on election day. The number one call I get from local clerks is assistance because their tabulator has jammed. And I would be remiss if I did not mention the number one cause of a jamming tabulator is the inappropriate use of a ballot marking device. So most of the counties in the state of Michigan have Dominion software, and Dominion's preferred ballot marking device is a Sharpie. So please make sure everyone is using Sharpies and don't give in to that Sharpie gate mis and disinformation, because actually Sharpies are the preferred ballot marking device in the majority of the counties in the state of Michigan, and even the counties that don't use Dominion also prefer Sharpies. So those are the calls that I get on election day. And then when polls close, so polls close at 8 p.m. on a local time in Michigan, local time because we do have 2 time zones in the state. So once polls close, then the local clerk will work with his or her precinct workers to close up the polling location. Once the polling location is closed up, unofficial results are sent to me at the county level for me to post online. Now, when they're sent to me, so I can post some unofficial results as well, but it's also the tabulator tape, the poll book, all of the media for the computers, that's all given back to me at the county level. I like to have control of that. My background is actually retail, something that wasn't mentioned, but I like to know where all of the things are. So all of that electronic media is brought back to the county level. Ballots are not brought back to me. Applications to vote are not brought back to me. In fact, the only ballot that a county clerk typically will touch is their own. Michigan's elections are extremely decentralized. So I talked about how the county clerk programs it, orders it, sends it directly to that local clerk, that city and township clerk. They're the ones that run the day of the election. Now, statute does permit a local clerk to contract with a county clerk for the processing of an absentee counting board, which is an absent voter ballot. When all the absent voter ballots come in for a jurisdiction, that local clerk could contract with the county clerk. That's been done in 3 counties that I'm aware of: Oakland, Ottawa, and Ingham. So we have done some of that. Now, certainly with proposal 2, which I'll talk about later, that's going to change the opportunities for election administration, but currently that's what we have. The next, so I post all of the unofficial results. Statute requires that by 9 o'clock in the morning or 1 o'clock in the afternoon, the Thursday after the Tuesday election, the Board of Canvassers must meet. The reason I don't know is because my Board of Canvassers, we meet at 9 a.m. on Wednesday because we got stuff to do. So the Board of Canvassers is made up of 2 Democrats and 2 Republicans, okay? These individuals are nominated by their respective parties. So the Ingham, for my county, the Ingham County Republican Party will nominate 3 individuals that they wish to serve as a Board of Canvasser. The Board of Commissioners will appoint one of them. And same for the Democrats. So the Board of Canvassers is made up of 2 Democrats and 2 Republicans. And those individuals will go through the entire election and make sure for every vote cast, there was a voter that voted. So in Michigan, we don't know how you vote, but we do know if you voted. In some states, like the great state of Florida, you register with your party affiliation. Michigan, we do not register with our party affiliation. Many people think they're registered as a Democrat or registered as a Republican. Not in this state. In the state of Michigan, you are not registered based on party affiliation. Really smart people will try to figure out what your party affiliation, if you participated in a specific presidential primary, if you have a membership to a certain magazine, if you give money to a certain nonprofit, and try to figure out what party you identify with. But that's not a clerk thing. That's not an election thing. We do not pay attention to party affiliation. So the canvassers will go through the entire election and ultimately certify the results. And then those results will be then posted as official results. And if there are state or federal candidates, the official results will be sent to the Secretary of State's office. And you would think, okay, great, then you're done with the election. No, Dave, we are not even close to done with the election. So that is the certification of the election, but we now have the opportunity for aggrieved parties to file for a recount. And so the recount statute is pretty straightforward. The legislature did increase the fees associated with those candidate recount filings. And it is the position of the Michigan Association of County Clerks that perhaps the legislature would wish to define who is an aggrieved party for ballot questions, as well as some of the fees associated with such recounts, because the partial recounts that we did in the state of Michigan of Proposal 2 and Proposal 3 did not cover the costs incurred by the counties. So it's the county clerk that is in charge of the recount. We work with the Board of Canvassers, whether it's a state recount, county recount, or even a tiny little township recount. It's the county clerk and the Board of Canvassers that do that recount, sometimes in coordination with the state Secretary of State's office if it's a statewide. And that's the recount. And then you think, Kim, we're done with the election. No, we are still not done with the election, because in Michigan, when I was in the legislature, we voted to require audits. And so in conjunction with the Secretary of State's office, and when I say in conjunction with, the Secretary of State's office tells us which precincts to audit. The county clerk then goes to that polling location and that local clerk's office and audits the election. So this is a procedural audit to make sure that the Democrats and Republican precinct workers were nominated by the local election commission, that that notice was posted for the public accuracy testing. The public accuracy testing was done. All of those things. And then we also will hand tally specified races as determined by the Secretary of State's office. So that's the audit. So even months after the election, we're still running the election. And keep in mind, months before the election, we were running the election. Okay. So there are so many hands and eyes involved in election administration, specifically in Michigan, that that lets me know, and that's why I am comfortable to say that I know our elections are some of the safest and most secure in the nation. Now, keep in mind, county clerks are partisanly elected. Some city clerks are appointed, some are also elected, and then the township clerks are all elected. Majority of election officials in this great state are Republican. It's just the way that it is. Most of the county clerks are Republican. So it's been interesting watching this narrative that our elections must be rigged by a certain group of individuals, because they, I have a dear friend who's a county clerk, and he is having to work with his biggest supporters and tell them, no, the election's not rigged, that like, these are all the procedures that are followed. These are all the checks and balances. This is everything we do. Like, and it's been very difficult to watch. The attacks on election administration. I work with a lot of election officials around the United States, and they are being attacked just like they are in Michigan, and some even more so. I point to my friend in Wisconsin in particular. So it's unfortunate because we are civil servants. We are doing our job, and many of my colleagues are being attacked for doing that. Out of Michigan's 83 county clerks, nearly 24 have left the field since the November 2020 election. I expect that to increase after the 2024 election. The 2024 election is going to be a booger. So that's election. Now, we have a few election dates in Michigan: May, August, and November, all subject to change at just a few weeks' notice by the legislature. Right now, we have a presidential primary that is scheduled for February of next year. The Democratic Party, the National Democratic Party is on board with that date. The Republican National Party is not on board with that date as of yet. So something needs to happen. But so in Michigan, we will have an election in February. There has been discussion in the legislature that we may get rid of that May election date, and we may move the August primary date to June. But we're going to keep the November date. So we don't, election administrators, we just want to make sure we have enough time program between the elections. So the election dates could change in the very near future, but there's a lot changing in the election world in the very near future with the passage of Proposal 2. So Proposal 2 is going to afford voters the opportunity to exercise their right to vote in a different or same way, depending upon their choice. Local clerks or county clerks, whatever they agree to do, because the real on election administration side, we need to find out who's doing the minimum of 9 days early voting. It's going to be the local clerk. Is it going to be the county clerk? It's going to be local clerks contracting together, or will the local clerks contract with the county? Who's going to be responsible for sending out notice to the voters of where their polling locations are? Who's going to be responsible for paying the bills? Who's going to be responsible for all of these requirements that we have in current election procedures and law? So we're going to have a minimum of 9 days of early voting. Now, note that I said a minimum, because that is a minimum now ingrained in the Michigan Constitution. So 9 days of early voting, it's going to cost more money. It has to cost more money, right? Like whether it's the local clerk or the county clerk, someone's going to have to hire people to work 8 hours a day, 9 days, a minimum. It's going to cost money. Most local clerks are part-time, quarter-time. They have day jobs. So we're gonna have to hire people. Maybe they're gonna want to contract with the county. Maybe they don't want to contract with the county. Maybe the county doesn't want to have any part of running elections on election day. So depending upon what the arrangements are, that will tell us how much it's going to cost, because it's hard to quantify how much this is going to cost, because we could save money if we all bunch together, but it's not likely. Not all jurisdictions are going to be able to bunch together. If you think of the jurisdictions in the Upper Peninsula, the one county is not going to be able to have one vote center for the entire county. That's just not proper. It would take voters a very long time to get to that one vote center. So we, as the Michigan Association of County Clerks, have requested to allow for flexibility for local clerks and county clerks, and not to take the one size fits all approach, because that would not be proper in this case. So what also is going to happen is our military voters will have an additional 6 days to get their ballot back to their local clerk. Right now in Michigan, if a military or overseas voter votes, that ballot, the paper ballot, has to be back in the possession of the local clerk before the polls close on election night, 8 p.m. local time. So in Michigan, we local clerks, not county clerk, local clerks will email the ballot to a member of the military overseas voter. They will have to print it, vote the ballot, and then mail it back. And it has to be in the possession of the local clerk, not the county clerk, not the local clerk five jurisdictions over, actually that local clerk. And there are many difficulties with that. One, our military members who are on a boat have one dot matrix printer on the entire ship. I know this. And then mail is only picked up once, depending upon if they're very active, it may only be picked up once a month. And I've heard stories of a pallet of mail being dropped in the ocean. Now, that's upsetting when it's your Amazon package, but to me, it is devastating when it's someone's ballot that was supposed to be mailed back to the local clerk. So Proposal 2 will allow the military member to have an additional 6 days to get that ballot to the local clerk, so long as it was postmarked by election day. Now, I know that 6 days is not necessarily long enough, even for the US mail. We saw that during COVID. I was mailing death certificates to a funeral home that was literally 10 miles down the highway, and they weren't getting those death certificates for 3.5 weeks. So I do know that our US postal system has struggled. But remember when I talked about the Board of Canvassers canvassing the election? Under statute right now, they have to canvass and have that election certified within 2 weeks. And that's difficult for some of our really large counties already. But if we now have a military member that can get their ballot to their local clerk 6 days after election, we're going to need more time. So the Michigan Association of County Clerks have asked to increase that time to 4 weeks in order to certify and canvass the election. I think that's prudent. It allows more time. Also, personally, I think all military and overseas voters should be treated equally. Right now, it's just that military, it's not their spouse, it's not the humanitarian worker. And so we need to make sure we're treating all of our overseas voters equally. That's just a me thing, but I will be advocating for that as well. So, election world is crazy. It's fun. You can tell that I'm not in my office right now because I'm doing some election stuff. It doesn't really look like it, but I'm totally doing election stuff this week. And you'll learn more if you follow me on Twitter. I'm pretty secretive until after I'm back into the county. But election stuff is fun, and Michigan's elections are decentralized. We have a lot of hands and eyes watching, and it's an exciting time to be an election administrator. The struggle I have is that I've yet to meet someone who wanted to run elections or be an election administrator when they grew up. Most of us fell into this. Most election administrators just need a part-time gig, decided to intern in this government office. A friend knew a friend and they decided to take this job. Someone was termed out of the legislature, happened to be chairing elections, decided, yeah, I could do elections. I ran for office 3 times. How hard could it be? election administration is a lot different than running for office, just so you know. But we don't have the pipeline. There are certification programs for election workers, but usually it's already election workers that are taking those certification programs. In Ingham County, I started Election 101 about 8 or 9 years ago, just to help people understand how exciting election administration can be and try to find our future election officials, because we need to find them, because more and more election administrators are leaving the field. The average age of an election administrator in Michigan is not mine. And most of us are female, and there are a few males, but people are retiring or they're leaving the field, and we are in desperate need of more, dedicated election administrators. So proposal 2 is exciting. There's so much unknown, but we're going to need funding. And so we're working with our legislature to try to figure out how much funding. So internally, we're trying to figure out how much funding we need, so that then we can make that ask with the legislature. The implementation is actually not scheduled until next year. So I am hopeful that we're able to do a lot of voter education about what an absentee ballot is versus a mail ballot is, and what early voting is versus same election day in person. And we're going to need to update many of our statutes in regards to when a vote is actually cast, because right now a vote isn't cast until polls open on election day. All those absentee ballots that are mailed. So we're going to need to change that, because once a ballot goes through that tabulator, we're not going to be able to retrieve it because someone passed away or someone moved out of the district or their favorite candidate just dropped out. Like, we're not going to be able to do that. So we're going to need to look at those things as well. But a lot of the focus is going to be on funding, and then what an agreement looks like for early voting for those jurisdictions that wish to contract with each other, the county, or anything like that. So why don't I open it up for questions, if that's okay? What does legislation say about incarcerated individuals voting in elections? Thank you, Marcia. So Marcia, in Michigan, once someone has served their time, they are absolutely afforded the opportunity to exercise their right to vote. If they are awaiting trial or awaiting sentencing, then they may also vote. While they are serving their time, they may not vote. This is not the case in other states like Florida. In Florida, they just lose their right completely after serving their time. But then also in Florida, if I recall, someone can be deemed mentally incompetent and lose their right to vote. That is not the case in Michigan. Do they still make ink for adopting? I don't know. That could be a question I asked one of our military members. But I think it was 3 or 4 years ago. It was out of San Diego, California. I think it was the USS America, and they were talking about dot matrix printers. That's also when they told me about a pallet of mail that dropped in the sea, never to be found again. And I mean, the struggles our members of military have to downloading an attachment. If that's a risk. Downloading an attachment is a risk that their system might not allow. So there are many risks along the way, for many difficulties along the way for our military and overseas voters to exercise their right to vote. The feds sent a few of us to Italy, and we had a hard time finding a fax machine because some states allow for a fax return of a mailed ballot, a voted ballot. Michigan does not, but some states do. And the fax machine availability was very limited, and their hours stunk. So, I mean, it was like 9 o'clock in the morning until they finally opened up. And in Ingham County, I don't have a fax machine. It's actually an email. It goes through the email system, but whatever. Michigan, you have to snail mail your ballot back. In a world of misinformation, how does the clerk's office to combat this issue? What approaches seem to work best? Okay, Scott. So most election administrators, are used to doing the job in the background and not having to educate the public or the members of the press. They're not used to the combat. They're not used to the debate. So some nonprofit organizations have worked with election administrators such as myself. Issue 1 is one in particular, to try to push back on that mis and disinformation. The difficulty is, there are many, the difficulty is by the time I hear about the conspiracy, it's already traveled, right? And then also there is just so if we talk about one Michigan mis and disinformation individual, she was hired to clean she was hired to Windex a glass panel, but she worked an election, and therefore that gave her some credential to talk about how she knew our elections were rigged. That's not the case. She didn't even understand what she was looking at. She was there to clean. She was there to clean. So it's very difficult when people are given that credential, even she might have embellished a bit. So for me, what has worked is just trying to educate constantly. If it's not working, it's at least making me feel better when I wave at people because they're being absolutely ridiculous with their claims. But most election administrators aren't, that's not their personality. Their personality is not to immediately, educate. Their personality is just say, oh, you're wrong, and go about doing their job. Election administrators, we don't have PR budgets. We don't have the resources that we would need to combat all of this mis and disinformation. Many don't have the support from their own legislative funding source. So whether it be the county board of commissioners or their township or their city council, many election administrators don't have that support. I am fortunate in that I have the support from my board of commissioners, but also my background allows me to be a little bit more educational than the average clerk would choose to be with some of those naysayers. So I'm hoping it's making a dent. I'm not sure if it really is, Scott, but it makes me feel a little bit better when I wave at somebody and tell them how wrong they are. And then hopefully somebody was paying attention and learned a little bit more about elections.
I have learned more about elections following you on Twitter and in just the past 38 minutes than I think I got in my entire undergrad. But one question that popped up in the chat that is still in reference to incarcerated individuals that I wanted to make sure we didn't lose. Do incarcerated individuals in the population count in the population in their home county or the county in which they're incarcerated?
So once they're incarcerated, they're not permitted to vote when they're serving their time. In Michigan, the voter decides where their voting address should be. It is to match their driver's license or Michigan ID. So if an individual is released from prison, they would go, hopefully they still have a support system. Hopefully they would have family and they may move in with them. That would likely be what their address would be. It's not going to be the prison because they have left that. But in Michigan, we also do permit our homeless population, our homeless population to have cross streets as their address. Because we do have individuals who absolutely should be still afforded the opportunity to exercise their right to vote that just don't have a address as I'm privileged to have one.
So I have a question that I get from my students a lot of times, and I try to answer it, but I don't really know if my answer is the real answer or not. So with everything voting being, electronic, the tabulators, all of that, we don't need this room full of people, counting up every single ballot and, going through it a couple of times to make sure it's right. Why don't we know immediately when the polls close who our winners are?
Oh, okay. So in Michigan, as long as I live, we shall have paper ballots. Paper ballots can be audited. They can be retabulated, recounted. So paper ballots, one, make sure we have paper ballots. The reason it takes so long. All right, so first let's talk about how we know absentee ballot voting right now. Okay, so not in person, we're gonna talk about absentee voting, how we know it today, not next year. So absentee voting in Michigan, in order to exercise your right to vote via absentee ballot, AV ballot, you have to submit a request to your local clerk. That request has your signature on it. When the local clerk, city or township, not county, city or township clerk obtains that request, they're going to match the signature on that request with the signature that's in the qualified voter file. Qualified voter file grabs some information from Secretary of State's office, your signature. You can also update your signature, and really good local clerks will continue to update your signature because your signature does change over time. So they're going to compare that signature with the signature on file for you in the qualified voter file, QVF. Then if everything matches, that local clerk will mail the ballot to the address that voter asked to have it mailed to. Sometimes it's, Stockbridge, Michigan. Sometimes it's, Florida, depending upon where they are in November or August or, then they will vote their ballot. So they're voting their ballot. They then put the voter will put the ballot in a secrecy sleeve. That's another envelope. And then put it in the other envelope. And then the other envelope, they're going to seal, and then they are going to sign the back of that envelope. If they don't, the local clerk will call them, and it's a thing. So when that ballot comes back to the local clerk, city or township clerk, the ballot comes back to that local clerk. It can be returned either in person, drop box, or US mail to that local clerk. Local clerk takes that ballot, compares the signature on the outside of that envelope to ding, 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 the signature in the qualified voter file. They then put that ballot aside. There's a filing mechanism that they use, but in Michigan, we do not currently allow early tabulation or early processing of ballots. But hey, Barb, I thought the legislature passed early processing of ballots. Not really. They allowed local clerks to open envelopes, and that's about it. So not actually feeding through all that stuff. So in Michigan, the absentee ballot hangs out securely until election day. When polls open at 8 a.m. local time on election day, then the absentee county board for our large jurisdictions will have to start the assembly line process of ultimately processing the absentee ballot. The reason the absentee ballots take so much longer is as follows. There are Democrats and Republicans and other parties along the process. They open the envelope, remove, see the number on the ballot stub, which is usually at the top right, that number, and see that person and make sure that ballot number is the same ballot number that was issued to that person in the system, right? Then when they decide that, yes, those ballot numbers match, that is in fact the ballot that was issued to that person, they will remove the ballot stub, the little perforated top. Then they will send it down the assembly line to then remove the ballot from the secrecy envelope, to then flatten the ballot so it'll go through the tabulator and further down the line. The reason it takes so long is because there are so many checks for security. There's so many checks to make sure the secrecy of the vote for that voter is maintained. So by the time someone actually sees the ballot, the name is completely gone from that ballot along the assembly line. And we're talking hundreds of thousands of ballots that have to be processed, some through a tabulator that you feed it through, and some through a high-speed tabulator. But it does take a long time to process those ballots. And in Michigan, we also, that cannot be closed up until polls close officially, and then sent up to the county level. So the county can't have it until polls close as well. That's absentee votes. That's a lot of them, especially when we were sharing germs and people were dying. Then so for election day voting, the voter comes in Michigan, I'd like to vote. Do you have your ID? No, left it in the car. Great. Sign this affidavit that you are who you say you are under penalty of perjury, and we'll issue a ballot. And then you move all the way down, same checks, right? And then you feed your ballot through. And typically the in-person election day precincts are quicker to report because there's just less of them, and they're moving quicker. And the reason there are so many people is for the security of our elections, not just the protection of the vote, so no one knows how someone voted, but also we need to have Democrats and Republicans side by side working with each other. So when a voter needs assistance, we need a Democrat, we need a Republican together to make sure that one isn't using any undue influence with that voter. So that's why there are so many people all the way down the line. And then when unofficial results are posted, so it is taking longer for unofficial results to post, and that is a direct result of security concerns. We have learned that perhaps we shouldn't be participating in certain election information sharing techniques that used to be okay, but I've met some 10-year-olds that are brilliant. So now we do things a little bit differently to maintain the security of our elections. And then even then, all that paper stuff that I talked about and the media is all still brought up to the county level. So the county usually doesn't close until many, sometimes a couple of days after the election. So last presidential, I think I didn't close for 3 days. I didn't go home. Maybe that was, it's all a blur. It was one of the presidentials that I was literally there for 3 days. And so was my staff. It was great. We still need to invest in cots just in preparation for 2024. But so that's why it takes so long, is because we, as election administrators, appointed, elected, Democrat, Republican, nonpartisan, want to make sure we get it right and want to make sure it is secure. That's why it takes a long time. And we must always vote on paper ballot. I know I do all my credit union stuff on my phone too, but there's insurance for something like that, right? FDIC insures if something goes wrong. There is no insurance high enough to protect your right to vote. So we have to continue to rely on paper. And more states have actually gone back to paper. I think there's only one that hasn't quite done it yet. Don't quote me on that one. More states are going back to paper because it is safer and more secure. Just like your birth record and your death records and your marriage license. All of that is paper because paper is the most secure way to keep records.
So I was going to ask about Sharpies versus ballpoint pens because I've seen non-election officials, particularly voting machine glass cleaners, talk about not using Sharpies, but you covered that already. So Scott asked a great question in the chat. Where can social studies educators send students to look at becoming superhero voter administrators? Are there specific resources that may be interesting for future voter leaders to look at? Scott and all of us, I think, love the idea of social studies classrooms presenting the many ways.
Oh, my soul. Yes, I love the idea of younger people serving as precinct workers because younger people are not afraid of computers. And when younger people serve as precinct workers, they're more inclined to exercise their right to vote from now and into the future and encourage their peers to do the same. And it takes away a lot of the fear of interacting with the government and voting. So what you should do, contact your local city or township clerk. They're the ones that hire the precinct workers. And your students might get a little nervous because they're going to have to declare their party affiliation. And what I can say to that is they can always change later when they become more educated. They can always, change their party affiliation, right? You think you're one thing and then you learn about other things in the world and maybe you change your party affiliation. But the party affiliation is necessary because we need to have a DNR assisting voters. Your local city or township clerk is who hires them. If they don't respond to you, reach out to your county clerk. Your county clerk for some of the smaller counties, it's your county clerk that actually will train those workers. So get on your county clerk's radar or have your students get on their radar. MVP is the Michigan Voter Program. It's an online system that the Secretary of State launched to encourage people who are interested in serving as precinct workers to put their data in, and then they can get information. I don't think that's the best way, candidly. I think the best way is to reach out to your local city or township clerk and develop that relationship with them and let them know what you're up to. Like, hey, I got a bunch of students and I am pretty sure you are going to get a positive response. Someone asked, before I answer that, I want to talk about students and voting. So in Michigan, under Proposal 3, we allowed same-day voter registration. And this was another constitutional amendment done by the voters because the legislature wouldn't do anything. And same day voter registration allows students to go to their polling location or go to their local clerk's office on election day and register to vote, update their address from Marquette City to now East Lansing, and exercise their right to vote. And this is a wonderful opportunity for student engagement, to be involved as a voter in their community. But some things I'm hearing is that how dare students wait until the last minute to get in line to update their voter registration and exercise the right to vote. They didn't wait till the last minute. They followed the law. The law allows any voter to go to their clerk's office prior to polls closing on election day, get in line, update their address, register to vote, and exercise their right to vote. So if you hear of anyone saying, talking down on students because they happen to wait in line for hours to exercise their right to vote on election day, please correct them and show them the error in their ways. Also, in Michigan, we require ballots to be mailed back to the local clerk. And back in the olden days, I had a pen pal. I would wait a week to determine what she had to say to my letter that I wrote her a week before. That is not the experience of most of our younger people nowadays. And where I knew how to buy a stamp, where to go to buy a stamp, and how much postage was, that's not the experience of our students right now. I don't even know how much postage is today, quite frankly. It's been changing a lot. But so the thought of, well, the student can certainly vote by an absentee ballot, buy a stamp, mail it. No. It usually takes more than one stamp, right, to mail the ballot back. But also, I have different experiences than our young people do today, and they may not be comfortable or have an idea of how to get a stamp, where to get a stamp. And so that's, something to just log up there as well, because voting can be very intimidating for our younger people, whether they're trying to vote by absentee and deal with an actual ballot marking device, a Sharpie, they have to write on paper. They have to then maybe buy a stamp or two and mail it back, not the day of election, but 2 weeks before, so that it actually has time to get to the local clerk. Or if they're going to the polling location and they're greeted by someone who's not smiling at them and they're already trying to do something with the government, then they have to show their ID and they have to fill out paper forms with a pen. And then my mom took me to the polling location for every election. Those are the experiences I had. That is not the experience the majority of our young people have had. So I think that needs to be kept in mind. And I would submit to you all that your local or county clerk would probably be more than willing to do an election for you, whether that be homecoming persons or best ice cream or something like that, to just try to start to get rid of some of that fear of exercising one's right to vote. I mean, certainly they should be coming to your schools to register students to vote. But do know that most election officials just want everyone to exercise their right to vote. So don't be afraid to reach out. And then someone wanted me to talk about how we do testing again. It was somewhere in here. So testing is called public accuracy testing. And it is done by the local clerk because it was the county clerk that programmed the systems. So the local clerk will test the ballots and test the whole system, and they will mark a ballot any possible way it can be marked. So for the larger elections, it's quite an undertaking. And then also do cross votes, overvotes, undervotes, and stray marks and everything else, and make sure that the results come out proper. And then they will zero it all out, lock it all up for election day. So I think I covered that question. Yeah, you put 3 stamps on your last AV ballot. Yeah.
I think one more question from Marcia. Can college students automatically be eligible to vote on campus or home with completing a form for future consideration?
So in Michigan, they may register to vote at their college address if they so desire. There was a few years back, Mike Rogers was in the legislature and Diane Byrum was as well. And legislation passed to require the driver's license address to match the voter address. And it is rumored that that is the reason why Mike Rogers won against Diane Byrum by 111 votes. That was a long time ago. And now we have same-day voter registration. So now those students can go to their clerk's office and update their address to reflect what they consider their home, their voting residence, which could very well be Ann Arbor or East Lansing or Grand Rapids, wherever they are going to school. So there's not a specific form, it's just an update of voter address, but that also does update the driver's license address. This does not affect student aid or anything like that. It just updates the address for that voter.
Marcia, your hand's up. Did you have another question you wanted to ask, a follow-up to that?
Yeah, so I don't mean like, is it possible for it to be done? I mean, like, can it be considered? Because if I'm in college, the chances of me being able to get to my city clerk is pretty low, depending on where I go to school. I went to school in Atlanta, but I was registered to vote here. And so I had to do, and this was a minute ago. So I I know the process can be kind of tedious. We had to kind of do the absentee ballot some kind of wonky way, because I wanted to make sure when I turned 18, while I was still down there, I was able to vote. So is there any way that it just can automatically happen, that if I'm in school, because you know everything, like, no?
That cannot automatically happen. I am still fighting with MSU Board of Trustees, which was chaired by my mother for many years, to gain access to the dorms to register students to vote. So it doesn't automatically happen. And it shouldn't really, right? Like, I wouldn't want someone to think they know, because I was going to law school, that address should automatically be my address for voting. So there needs to be some request on the voter's part to change that address. So the voter could still vote while living in Atlanta, could still vote in the Michigan election. That would be, as we know it currently, as absentee voting, not much different than it was a minute ago. Or depending upon what what Georgia laws are, they may be able to register to vote in Georgia. I'm not sure what those rules are. But if they lived in East Lansing with their parents and decided to go to that school in Ann Arbor, because they had already gotten their undergrad from Michigan State. So they've moved to Ann Arbor to get their master's degree. They may update their voter registration to that Ann Arbor address and vote in Ann Arbor elections, or they could request an absentee ballot from East Lansing, or visit East Lansing to, say hi to mom and dad or their parents for a minute and vote that way. So there is an option for those students, depending upon what they believe their voting address should be. Did that answer?
We've got a thumbs up from.
Okay, thumbs up.
Yeah, it is what it is, but I just wish there was some way, like they had an option, because most of the time they're voting for the first time. So it's just kind of a wonky thing, but yeah, no, you answered. Thank you.
Yeah, and so for East Lansing in particular, it is in my county. I have encouraged the East Lansing City Council to look at making their elections all on even years to encourage student participation. Right now, their city council elections are on odd years. Not only does that cost them thousands of dollars, but it also is not, they're having their city council elections during a time when they know students are less engaged. In a minute, I'll tell you how I feel about that. What else is up here?
I think that's most of the questions from the chat.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, so anytime I can geek out about elections, thank you so much. If you want I know election administrators are usually very willing to talk about election administration to young people. So certainly ask if they're not willing to. I can travel and be nonpartisan. Election administrators, we are used to being the ones that just get the work done, and now we're being put often in front of cameras. But it's an interesting profession. It's a really interesting profession. I have met some amazingly dedicated individuals that I know we will get through this. I know our democracy is strong. There are amazing humans that are showing up and doing the work day after day after day, even with the attacks, even with the people standing outside of their homes and the nasty emails and, you know, all of that. We are your neighbors. We are at the drop-off line at middle school. We're the swim coach. You know, we're just people. And if I leave you with nothing, that tonight, if you remember nothing I said, it is elections are fun and people should get more involved in election administration. I mean, certainly exercise your right to vote, but then encourage people to work elections. It's amazing stuff how Democrats and Republicans come together to make sure that all qualified registered voters are exercising their right to vote. It's exciting stuff. That's all I got. Was it boring?
We'd like to again thank Clerk Barb Byrum for her time this evening. This was a master's class in election, and we are super grateful for you giving up an hour of your evening to share your experiences with us. I don't think anyone could have done a better job on this topic than you did. So we are super appreciative of you for the hour of your time you gave up. For everyone who's in attendance tonight, as I mentioned at the start of this session, we'll have the video recap up within 24 to 48 hours. Our registration system will kick back an email saying, hey, here's your sketch app if you want it, and here's a link to the recording. And we, on behalf of MCSS, we look forward to bringing more professional learning offerings your way in the near future. On behalf of all these people listed here on this credit slide, I'd like to thank you all for your time and attendance this evening. And how about another round of applause, amazing round of applause for the ever awesome Barb Byrum.
Thank you all very much. Thank you. And, you know, honestly, email or direct message me on Twitter if you have any questions or any concerns or anything like that.